Hello gamers, welcome to a different kind of video. Everyone was asking me, what is my opinion on the big Skullgirls update? I have never seen such a controversial update hit this game in years. I can't remember the last time that this game got an update that caused so much anger and frustration in recent memory. Like, I can't remember the last time that I've seen such an outrage about an update like this. And I think this update ranges from minor insignificant changes to substantial to all the way to egregious changes. To start with the minor insignificant changes, it's mostly the Philia stuff because Philia is 16 years old, so already she's a minor, so I understand why they probably did not want to sexualize a minor in this game. Uh, they also changed a few of the scenes in the story mode with her, both in her story mode and in Eliza's story mode. In Philia's story mode, in the opening, she gets sexually harassed by some guy in a diner. The way that they play that scene now is from the waist up, and when it happens and she like beats the shit out of him, instead of showing the character's underwear, they just have the skirt cover the underwear. And that I understand why they did that change as well, because you have a character that's been sexually harassed and it kind of defeats the message at the end by still showing the character's underwear. It's more similar to how people had issues with how Persona 5 handles the character like on both in her costume and how other characters interact with her throughout the game. So I understand in that kind of way, in a narrative sense, that it does kind of muddy up the character as well in the relationship with what the viewer is seeing. So I understand that aspect of it, which again is why I don't think the changes to Philia are that significant. They changed her underwear color from white to black to de-emphasize the underwear, no matter the color palette. You can pick any color and it will still be black. So that's what they did for that. In Eliza's story mode, when Eliza captures Squiggly, Philia, and Misfortune, Philia is captured in a way that she has a ball gag in her mouth and she's bound in a very sexual way with a blindfold. In this new update, they had changed the illustration where now she has a normal gag instead of a ball gag, and she's no longer blindfolded, and her body is not emphasized in the bondage. This I don't mind in the sense that like it still conveys the character's story, Eliza's character arc in that story mode, so I understand that. The issue mostly comes from how they painted over the original, because it's very obvious that it's a rough, crude paint over instead of something that looks naturally there. So I do kind of wish that they either repainted that entire illustration or they just painted the new Philia drawing better, I guess, to make it seem more natural, because it just looks too it looks too obvious that it's not, that it doesn't belong. So I do think that the change itself is not innately bad, it's just mostly how the quality of it looks that I have the problem with. uh the other change that they've done is with Cerebella in Eliza's story. When Eliza impales her in the abdomen, it shows her clothing being ripped. They don't have her clothing being ripped in the story mode anymore, which I don't quite get why. Uh, because it was fine before. That's a weird change. It's not to me a very significant thing. It's a very insignificant change. I just kind of don't understand why. They also changed, actually that's it for the insignificant stuff actually. So that's all the insignificant changes. It's just stuff with Philia and like that Cerebella frame, and that really is it. So that to me, I didn't really care if that was the update. That would be the video, and we'd move on with our lives. But they also changed a few substantial things within the game story. They changed Big Man story mode. Now, I have not played his story mode since he came out initially in the game, so I can't really remember his full story mode. I do remember that he was beat up by cops, and that's kind of what led him to be the character he is, in the game. They removed the illustration of the cops beating the shit out of him, and I don't quite get why. Like, some people say they also removed the RoboCop reference as well, but the issue with them removing the cops being the shadow of Big Band is that it's not like Big Band story mode has glorified the cops. It's not like that they play that scene for laughs or anything. So them removing that frame, I just kind of don't. It, I think it does kind of get in the way of Big Band's whole story because that's part of like how he became who he is. So I don't quite get the point of censoring that scene in the story. Like you're showing something that's fucked up, and that's like the point. So that that aspect of it, I can't really say I agree with. The other thing they changed that's substantial is the egrets. Now, I don't really care for the egrets that much, to be honest, because I don't really find Parasol or Umbrella Story all that compelling. The only thing I find compelling about their story mode is just their relationship with the Skull Heart. That's pretty much it. But the issue with the egrets is that the perception of the egrets in the game's universe is that they're oppressive, authoritative regime, and it reflects that both in the character designs where they have costumes based off of Nazi regalia. And I understand why the studio probably wants to lean these characters away, because there are a lot of parts of the story where you're supposed to be rooting for the egrets, and it's like it's kind of jarring that they have that juxtaposition where you're like, yeah, then you're like, wait a second, they have Nazi like, it's just kind of weird, like, and jarring on a narrative sense. But at the same time, there are parts of the story that show that the egrets are not necessarily the greatest force in the game either. So the change I would have done with this is mostly stuff that would work better in Skullgirls 2, where you have the characters that are aware of the perception that no one likes them. Like, oh, they think that we're an authoritative, oppressive regime. We should change how we look and change how we act because we're not doing any favors for the public. Have the people who feel that way not go with that outfit and have a different outfit that is like, we think that this should be the new Egret's outfit, that kind of stuff. Like, be the change they want to be, that kind of shit. Then have the people who are like part of the old ways, and they don't want to change, that kind of stuff. Have that, like, have them keep the old traditions, and then have a story where they're kind of going head to head with that kind of stuff, which could be fleshed out in Skullgirls too. But they don't do that because we're not at that point yet, because we still have Marie to come out. So they want to retrofit this whole change, which I think just is, it's not a winning change, because you could understand why they'd want that change, but it also conflicts with other aspects of the story of Skullgirls. Now, I've heard some people say that they've changed Parasol's story mode as well. I have not played Parasol's story mode since the game came out, so I can't really remember or know what they did or didn't change as far as that's concerned. I just know that they changed the costumes for the egrets, and Parasol's character model of the Mitsuru color palette for Parasol no longer has the armband. So again, I understand why, because at the same time, like, people who play Persona 3, they know it's a C's armband, but you have to convey that. Oh my god, of course it's calling. It's bullshit. Yeah, it's Bam. What? Okay, I'm doing a video. Sorry, you have to like talk to no one. Anyways, anyways, uh, people who play Persona 3, they know that armbands for C's. But when you're going from like a 3D game like Persona 3, where it has enough like area to render a logo that's completely obvious C's, you can't convey that in 2D animation. I do think it's a little bit like, fucked up for that color palette to not have that anymore, but you still can kind of tell that's been through anyway. I do think that it's not a necessarily winning change for Parasol's color palette stuff, but it's just one of those things that it doesn't. I would still say that part that the Parasol color palette leans into the insignificant minor changes versus the egrets and the big band stuff being the most substantial changes to the game. Now, this I feel is the most egregious change that this update has brought upon the game. Is they removed some of the artwork in the gallery mode, and they removed art from the compendium. Now, this mostly affects people who are just buying the compendium today, or they bought the compendium, they forgot to, and they didn't know about this update, and they updated the compendium, thus removing the pages from their collection. This doesn't affect older owners that knew this was coming and was able to kind of say back up the files immediately, because I bought the digital art compendium way back when they sold that on their own website. They did use to sell the soundtrack and the compendium on their own website way back. So that's how I got it initially. So I have the very first original compendium, and then I got the one that they sold on Steam, and the one that came with the season 1 pass, and I got all the way up to the Black Dahlia update. Now obviously, now when I open Steam, I have to make sure I back up that file to keep everything that I wanted. Now I did already back up the original as well. I have like the original files that were removed backed up as it is, because I had the original art book as it is as well. So I have backups of those files I could find anywhere. But this mostly affects people who are just buying the compendium today, and I do think that's kind of fucked up. You can't just take stuff away, especially in an art compendium, that the whole point of a compendium like this is to show the person who bought it art from the conception stages all the way to production and all the way to the final product, and you see all the frame of animations, you see all this stuff. So them removing that, I do think is wrong, and I don't agree with that. I think that the frustration people have in general with this change, I think is pretty fair, because people have bought the game and supported it, and seeing content being removed like this is very alarming. And I do think this will affect the future perspective or perception of this company moving forward. When they put out a new game, people are going to start to wonder, are they going to remove some stuff in this game? Like if they sell an art compendium, are they going to remove pages down the line? Do I have to know that ahead of time and just back up whatever I get? So I do think that it kind of paints a very distrustful image of this company moving forward, that they're going to have to win back a lot of people over time. I don't think it's impossible for this company to win back trust, but it's just going to be hard, and it was something that could have been avoided or mitigated better. Because as I said, I think that if they've done Skullgirls 2, they're going to have to age up Philly. If they don't, whatever, but they would have to, I'd assume, in Skullgirls 2. They could then get away with changing how the egrets look in Skullgirls 2. Like, they could have done stuff that would have been more accepting in a sequel than to retrofit a game that's 10 years old, that's already, I'd argue, is dead. Now, I know a lot of people are going to just comment and laugh and say, Theo, you always said it's not dead. I've always been facetious when I said the game's not dead. I understand that the game is not going to pull in big, massive numbers, no matter how you look at it, but the game is still being carried by a very small group of people who love the game, but the game is pretty much at its end of its lifespan. And even with the Season 1 pass, it was just more surprising to me that they decided to do that instead of just making a new game, because it's like, the game has been out for years and you're now just doing a Season 1 pass? Like that, it's just weird in that kind of way. So I was surprised then that it got a Season 1 pass, because like this game is a very small game. Like they're not going to get a lot of people to buy the Season Pass as it is. And I don't think a lot of people did buy the Season Pass, if I remember correctly. I mean, I just assumed no one bought the Season Pass. I just assumed it was a very small group of people again who bought it. So I don't think that this change is necessarily like worthwhile on their part, because it just created more of a backlash and more distrust that they'll have to win back. So I do get a lot of the frustration and disappointment people have with this game. The game is now being review bombed on Steam. I have very complex thoughts on review bombing, but as a whole, the whole reason why people review bomb, I don't think is innately wrong. So I do think that people who are review bombing it are genuinely upset, and they do hope that at some point that either the company is aware of this and they either go back on it in some way, or they just kind of don't do this again moving forward. There are some people there that are just there for outrage's sake, sure, but as a whole, I'm just gonna say that people are genuinely mad, and they generally want to show that they're not happy with these changes. again, I understand that the art book stuff, the egret design changes, the big bands changes are like frustrating changes. But if you were to ask me how do I feel about the game now? Am I gonna still play it? Am I still gonna enjoy the game? Yeah, because what pulled me into Skullgirls wasn't the sexualized characters or the sexual content in general. It was just that I like the 2D sprite animation. I like the art style of it. I love the 60s aesthetic that it has. I loved all of that. And that's still in the game for me. The sexualization of that game I didn't really care about because at that point in my life I was already exhausted from all the anime that has all these gratuitous fan servicey kind of moments, so I was already kind of over that at that point when I got into the game. Now I'm a little bit like more whatever about it. Uh so them removing it again doesn't really matter to me, but I understand the frustration people have because there's a lot of stuff that people kind of like about Skullgirls' horny design choices and all that. But for me, I never really got into the game for that. I got into it for the art style and the gameplay. So I got and it's still there in the game. The moment they change something that does affect what I enjoy about the game, that's when I'll probably drop it. But it's still fun, and I still enjoy the gameplay and the characters that are in the game. I still stand by that Skullgirls Season 1 Pass did manage to get me to want to main all of the DLC characters, which I've never felt that way about any other fighting game before. Like, I love Guilty Gear, but I main how many of the DLC characters? Season 1, I main like Biken and Jacko. Season 2, it's Bedman. Like, season 2 is almost all of the characters except for Sin. I do not like Sin, so it's like I got into those other characters. Bridget, I'm like whatever on, but Skullgirls somehow found a way to get me to want to main Umbrella, Annie, um, oh my god, Black Dahlia, and probably Marie as well, because stuff I've seen about Marie looks really fun. So there is stuff about Skullgirls that I do like gameplay wise that I'll always go back to. But the frustration I see online and the people I see that are just generally bummed about it, I understand the frustration that people have that they bought this game and they liked it, and then the stuff that they enjoyed are slowly being removed. Like, I can't say that there is no problem with these changes or that people are overreacting. I think in some cases there is some overreaction to some of the things that this update has brought, but when it comes to the art book changes and the substantial story changes with the egrets and big band, those are things that I do think are debatable and are more inclined to be something that people are going to talk about for years and years and years, because it's not an easy change. These changes are not small. As I said in the beginning, if it was just the Philia stuff, I don't think people would care that much. It would just be something that people would just talk about a little bit, then they'd move on. But these are very huge changes to the game that I do think that it would affect public trust when this company goes on to make their own new game. So I don't fully support this change 100%, but I'm also not fully against it because I understand the reason. It's just I think that the way they've done it is not necessarily right or perfect, because again, the game is 10 years old. It's already at the end of its life cycle. Like, there's no, like, it's been at the end of its life cycle for years. That's why people have been telling me it's dead, Theo. The game is dead. Like, yeah, it's been out of its life cycle for years at this point, but there is still a small community that always goes back to it and plays online, and that's kind of what I've been enjoying about the game. So these changes to me doesn't affect me, but it's gonna affect a few people. I will be interested to see the Steam numbers over the months, because I looked at them yesterday when this update was live, and it even gained a few players. But again, these could just be people hopping on to see the changes for themselves. But even the total player count has been the same average for years, like literal years. Like, I would say until like 2015 is the like earliest. I don't know, like maybe even before that, the average player count that Steam has recorded, at least Steam Charts has averaged from like 100 to 200 to 300. The only times I've seen the player count jump to like 500 to 1,000 was like very rarely, to the point where it's probably just because of Evo that the player numbers jump that high in the first place. So as a whole, it doesn't affect me in the sense that the stuff that I like about the game is still there. I did not buy the game for the sexualized characters. I bought it for the fighting game and the art style of it. And this doesn't really change a lot of that. So the reason why I like the game is still present in the game, but I do get why people might leave the game over time. So that's where I land on it. I know that a lot of people are not going to agree with my take on it, and I know people might agree with it, but I do think that it's not a perfect solution that they've done, and I don't think it's a good solution either. And it does kind of continue the theme of the weariness of digital distribution, because even before this, there was a story years ago where Apple sold a movie. I can't remember the name of the movie. And then they removed it from the store. And when they did that, they removed it from some guy who bought the movie. Like, the person bought the movie and then he lost the rights to it because Apple pulled it. Now, as I always say, it's, the store is always up to the company, and I understand, some things cannot be sold forever on a store infinitely, and they might pull it. But if someone bought something, they should own it forever, no matter what. They should always own it. It should never be up to this, like, well, since it's not on the store, no one can own it. Like, no, I bought it, I should own it. Like, that's so it's the same kind of thing with this. As far as the principle of updating stuff that's in the game that's functional and all that, that I would say is a little murky in the sense that, as I said, the fighting is still there. The fighting game aspect of Skullgirls is still intact. But if someone wants to argue, well, I really like the material color palette, and now I can't get that anymore, it's like, that is a bummer, and that might be a deal breaker for some people. But for me, like, I would just kind of move past that. But these are not change. But I think the bigger issue with this change is just the stuff that they done to the story, the art book. That stuff is huge. Now, they did also remove the Soviet announcer, which was voiced by Mike Z. Now, Mike Z is a very problematic guy. Everyone has talked about Mike Z over the years. I did read the document that he put out like last year or so, and it did not win me over. I'll just say that, like Mike Z's account on all this stuff did not make me side with him. So that's just my very shorthand opinion of that. I do understand why the company wanted to remove that voice pack. However, I think they should have at least got a replacement ready before they did that. So that way it's like, yeah, we had to remove it because of Mike Z, so we changed it with another guy who's going to do the Soviet announcer. They should have just done that. Now, they could do that in the sense that they might just be casting it, because they did announce that the Season 1 pass also is going to have new voice lines for characters. So, people might say, well, are they going to pack that with Season 1? They shouldn't for the Soviet announcer. The Soviet announcer should be a free voice pack for everyone, but they could just be re-recording that with all at once, is what I'm trying to say. But even then, they should have just gotten a replacement ready, so that way it's like, yeah, we still have the Soviet announcer, we just had to change the voice actor. Instead of it being Mike Z, it's going to be someone else. But as I said, like, these are, like, that kind of change, the affiliate stuff is very minor to me. It's like, people would be upset about that, and then they would move on. But these other changes are massive changes that are hard to ignore, because it does affect your relationship with the world. There's a Twitter user by the name Tech Fuzz or Tech F. He has done a lot of artwork that I appreciate as well. He does really good artwork and all that kind of stuff. He had a good point saying that this change does take away a lot of the uniqueness of the Skullgirls lore and the world, because Skullgirls had a very gritty, unique story to it, and these changes kind of take away from that. And I agree that the change to big band story mode, the egrets does get in the way of that change gets in the way of the world tone that Skullgirls had. So I do think that those changes are very substantial that can't be ignored. Everything else is like, with Philia it's just minor stuff that I don't really care about. But the stuff with that, like, that is very big, that I do think is worth kind of highlighting, because it affects the story that you play the game for. If you really got into the story mode of Skullgirls, that does change the relationship of that. But again, I didn't get into Skullgirls for that initially because I didn't know the story mode of Skullgirls when the game was being announced and released. I got into it because of the gameplay, but these issues are pretty deep. That maybe it would have gone better if it was Skullgirls 2, that they've made these changes seem more organic instead of just retrofitting these changes. And that is the problem, is that these are not changes that make sense. These are changes that they're retrofitting to a game that came out 10 years ago. So that is my general opinion. I'll still be playing Skullgirls when Marie comes out. When the beta comes out for Marie, I'll still be playing it. Whatever, but these are very massive changes that I do get that people are not happy with. So thank you for watching this video. Hopefully you understand where I'm coming from, and be it you agree or disagree, that's fine. It is what it is, but I'll see you on the flip-flop. Bye-bye!